another instructive game which was not published, so nobody knows this game, where white conducts the similar plan of attack, only this time in an Italian game. e4, e5, knight, bishop c4, knight f6, d3, knight c6, knight f3, bishop c5, c3, a6, bishop b3, bishop a7, h3. So d5. Black decides to play d5 immediately. When in the chapter with the long castle, we were looking at the position when black was playing d6 and d5 in 2 moves. And here black plays d5 immediately. But the problem with the immediate move d5 is that black is not able to keep this center alive, because after queen e2 he has 2 castle, because the pawn on e5 was already hanging. So he has 2 castle, and now after castling white plays bishop g5, and the pawn d5 is under attack. Now d4 is not so good, because then white will play knight bd2, also possible castle to the king side, and after some exchanges on d4 or bishop d5 will be hanging, it will be extremely difficult for black to keep also the pawn on d4. So he decides to exchange on e4 here, but we already know that if black is not able to keep the pressure in the center, and he is forced to exchange on e4, or he does it in a voluntary base, then white is better. So in this position white is better, because after queen e7 white plays knight h2, with the idea knight g4, also the idea queen f3. Now after h6 bishop h4, the only way for black to defend himself from the threat of the move knight g4 is to play g5. But g5 is a weakening move, and this allows white to create the attack on the pawn g5. So now I play bishop g3, king h7, and now I'm trying to finish the development, playing knight d2, bishop e6, and I correctly avoid the exchange of the bishop b3. Although of course in this position it was also possible to keep my bishop on b3, because there is a weakness of the square f5 in the position, and also king on h7 is vulnerable and weak. Rook a d8, now knight hf1. Knight is going to e3. Also from e3 it can go to d5 or f5. Also white wants to play h4. So different possible plans. b5, now h4, g4, and now very important move h5, in order to create the weakness on the square g4. White wants to play bishop g3 h4 now, then the pawn g4 will be attacked, and the knight on f6 again will be pinned. So knight d7 has to move away, then knight e3, forcing the exchange on e3, because there were already too many threats of white in the position. Bishop e3, queen e3, queen c5, and now the move knight f1. After the exchange of the bishop a7, white has also advantage of the pair of bishops, and considering the fact that the pawn on g4 is weak, any ending will favor white. So bishop c4, and now bishop h4, important intermediate move. So white doesn't allow black to take on f1 at tempo f6, and now castling to the queen side. So you see that in this game two chapters are being combined, long castle as in the previous chapter and bishop g5 in the current one. Now bishop f1 is not possible because rook d7 check wins the queen on c5. So rook f7 is possible, but then rook d5 is a strong intermediate move, forcing black or to take on e3 or move the queen to f8. Here again bishop c2, very important bishop, is playing, because after bishop d5 we take on d5 with the check and we win the knight on c6. After queen f8 we can now play b3, forcing the exchange on f1, and now we have the pair of bishops, the damaged pawn structure of black on the king side, and very good attacking prospects for white. So white has a decisive advantage, but of course there are some technical difficulties to overcome. Before rook a d1, the idea is to sacrifice the exchange on d4 at some point. King h8, c4, and now the move knight d4. So this knight is strong, so white sacrifices the exchange, and after queen d4 white has a complete domination in the position. Pair of bishops, vulnerable black king, lot of weaknesses in black position. Queen g7, bishop g3, rook c8, now c5, targeting the pawn on b4, c6, rook f5, rook e8, now winning the pawn on b4. So now already 2 pawns for the exchange. Knight e5, queen c3, rook d7, bishop f4, king h7, king b2. White in no way in a hurry to win, to force any matters. Before white proceeds to the concrete play, he is trying to improve his position to the maximum. So the king from c1 is going to a safe place, to b2, then to a3, where it will be hidden from all checks. Queen e7, f3, gf3, gf3, queen g7, king a3, rook e7, bishop e3, transferring the bishop to d4. Then white will play f4, e5, and open the position completely. King h7, bishop d4, rook e6, b4, rook f8, bishop b3, rook e7, f4, knight d7, e5, and position of black collapsing. f5, rook f8, knight f8, bishop e5. So black resigned. Although this game was played against a relatively weak player, still I believe this is a good example how to combine different methods of attacks in Spanish or Italian.